By Jove, I think they've got it! Yes, welcome to this week's Movie Math, where both Universal and Warner Brothers are to be applauded, particularly Warner Brothers. No, both of them, damn it! Both of them are to be applauded for masterful release strategies that indicate a genuine path forward for the box office during this pandemic. Now, when I was first putting my notes together, I was going to say that WB and Uni had zapped the box office back to life, but let's not get ahead of ourselves, which I think some people might do, but it's just so nice to see some money coming in. But let's be honest, with a third wave hitting Europe, plus Bill Gates just saying that things likely won't be back to normal until the end of 2022, well then, Hollywood digital experimentation is still not only a good idea, but a necessary one, as we're seeing. Godzilla vs. Kong, and both these movies, by the way, have strong digital plays. Godzilla vs. Kong hits HBO Max on Wednesday and PVOD in the UK on April 1st. It might be hitting a couple of other countries digitally as well. While nobody will be on PVOD after 17 days. This is a Universal movie, and that's the strategy that they've gone with because their streaming service isn't really quite up and running to the degree that Disney Plus and HBO Max are. So they're the ones who came up with that 17-day window, which means that nobody will be available to rent for $20 for 48 hours on April 16th, right around the corner. But make no mistake, the boffo box office headlines that we're discussing today will fuel that digital business as well. So it's a win across the board because these movies are now hits. We love to see it. So let's start with the Titan, Godzilla vs. Kong, which at first Warner Brothers had infamously weaponized against the Snyder Cut, moving it up to the same, to come out the day after the Snyder Cut was supposed to be released. And this resulted in the Snyder Cut moving up a week and Godzilla vs. Kong moving back a few days, not only in the United States, but several other countries as well, while it's still stuck to that March 26th date in a couple of countries. And it won't hit Godzilla's home country, interestingly enough, Japan, until mid-May. But this all turned out to work in Godzilla vs. Kong's favor. It's a giant glass of lemonade. Why? Well, it means Godzilla vs. Kong hit theaters this weekend first in countries where English isn't the primary language, which sure is ideal for a movie where the script is the weak point. Furthermore, in a highly unusual move, Warner Brothers has held almost all reviews until tomorrow. A number of you have been asking me why I haven't reviewed the movie yet. I saw it last week. That's because the review embargo is tomorrow, March 29th. Now, usually, as soon as a movie opens anywhere on the planet Earth, the review embargo lifts. It's why reviews will sometimes come out for a movie a week or sometimes even 2 weeks early because it's playing somewhere on the planet Earth. However, this time Warner Brothers said no. You can't release the reviews until the movie has played for an entire weekend in some countries. I think that's really interesting because right now Godzilla vs. Kong has a 78 Rotten Tomatoes score, but expect that to drop to somewhere in the 60s or maybe even the 50s at least after tomorrow. That's what I suspect. We'll see. Some critics might be swayed by how successful the movie has been this weekend, not wanting to be a wet blanket. So it's a really smart strategy because no matter what critics say tomorrow, it's too late because Godzilla vs. Kong already has the luster of a 122 million global debut, which is Titan-sized for the pandemic. It's a party. It's a party. And that's really, perspective is everything, and it's very, very clever. Now, where did all this money come from? Why, China, of course, where the movie opened with 70 million. And that's even after the movie cut Zhang Zi, which I also find interesting because despite Disney's overt efforts to appeal to the Middle Kingdom with his past few movies, it's Warner Brothers' Godzilla vs. Kong that hits the home run, proving that just maybe, since China has their own robust movie industry, they might like their American movies to be different. Also, it's worth noting that Godzilla vs. Kong is doing business on par, because I'm going to bring this down to earth a little bit. So it's worth noting that Godzilla vs. Kong is doing business on par with Warner Brothers' previous Titan films in China. They like the Titan movies over there. And in other countries, it's doing Kong Skull Island business rather than Godzilla King of Monsters business. But, Godzilla King of Monsters did not do well. But Kong Skull Island, while it did okay, it didn't do great either. And so I'm mentioning this because the reason those movies were not huge hits was because they didn't do particularly good business in the United States. They both only got a little bit past 100 million, which a blockbuster like that should do much better than. So Warner Brothers' Titan franchise has always been an international play, meaning that this boffo opening weekend overseas doesn't guarantee necessarily a stateside hit. However, it's going to be really interesting to see what happens this coming week, because this is the first supposed crowd pleaser blockbuster of the pandemic. We keep saying, if we really want to see what's possible, when they finally release a movie that's really, really amazing. And therefore, maybe that would make this movie critic-proof, right? No matter what that RT score might be. Also, with the vaccine rolling out, restrictions lifting, even if a lot of people think that's a bad idea, they're still being lifted right now, and spring weather is starting to bloom. So Godzilla vs. Kong could benefit from positioning, even in the United States, where previous Titan movies didn't connect. For those of you in the USA and Europe, I think those are the Western markets where the Titan movies haven't previously connected and are also being pretty hard hit with coronavirus right now. So if you're in these markets, and also anyone can play this game if they'd like down below, are you planning to see Godzilla vs. Kong when it opens this week? And are you seeing it in theaters, or are you watching it on digital if it's available to you? Plus, would you see Godzilla vs. Kong under normal circumstances, or is this a special pandemic treat? Now, before we take a look at the domestic box office and how Uni's Nobody debuted, here's a word from Discovery Plus. And today's movie math is brought to you by Discovery Plus. As you try to figure out what to watch this coming week, it would be tough to beat the variety on this new streaming service. Do you want to see the craziest and cutest beauty pageant ever? Then check out new show Pig Royalty that just started, where 35,000 families across the United States fight it out on the surprisingly competitive show pig circuit. Big pigs, big prizes. And speaking of competitions, if you prefer home design, then you'll love Rock the Block Season 2, where 4 teams of HGTV home renovation experts and designers renovate homes in a battle for the highest appraisal. Now, if murder is more your speed, then check out Unraveled, the Long Island Serial Killer. Investigative journalists Alexis Linkletter and Billy Jensen return to their native Long Island to take a deeper look at the 2010 and 2011 murders at Gilgo Beach that were never solved. All these shows are available on Discovery Plus, and you can tune in today via the link down below. It's $4.99 a month with ads and $6.99 a month without. And you can try it for free for 7 days. Thanks again to Discovery Plus for sponsoring this episode of Movie Math. Okay, now for the domestic box office. Now, while Nobody isn't the biggest debut of the pandemic, it's well above the 4 million that's been the standard for moderate movies opening during this difficult time. So that's very nice. And also, let's be honest here as well. Nobody chose to leave money on the table, because with no significant female or diverse characters, it was largely white men who showed up to see it. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. I'm just pointing it out, that when you put a movie together, you have to realize that you're making these choices. Nobody chose to target the white male demographic, and that demographic showed up. Also, since Nobody happens to be a really good movie, look at these fantastic audience scores. I really enjoyed it, even though, as I said, the third act was a little weak. But when you throw in this box office headline, the movie is going to just explode on PVOD when it hits April 16th, as it should. Also, I think some people who maybe felt they weren't represented in the movie weren't going to risk their lives to go see it at the box office, but they might be inclined to click on it. I'm curious, if you didn't see Nobody this weekend, when are you planning to see it? And also, does the box office headline change your mind about it at all in these audience scores? Now, Bob Odenkirk wants to break into movies, which is why he produced this film. And he's, again, by Jove, he's done it. Expect him to get more movie roles off of this for sure. But you know who I think is going to get scooped up even faster? Maybe even this week. He's going to get scooped up real fast. And that's Russian director Ilya Naishuller. Good for him. He didn't go home after Hardcore Henry. And I guarantee he'll be picked up very, very fast. Just like the directors of Bad Boys for Life. They're really fast he's going to get picked up, because he delivered a fantastic, inventive action film, fast and cheap. Oh boy, does that make him very valuable. This is also a huge win for 8711, which is David Leitch and Chad Stahelski's stunt company. If you look at some of the behind-the-scenes training footage of Bob Odenkirk and the stunt coordinator, the fight coordinator, you'll see he's wearing an 8711 t-shirt. That's their stunt company, which is now starting to move into production. They're producing their own films. David Leitch and his wife are producers on Nobody. So I think it's interesting to see them have a success outside of John Wick. They're going to have to mix it up a little bit. They can't just make a ton of John Wick style movies or they're going to dilute the market. But this is a really good next step. I'm very impressed. 8711. Everyone's going to start to know that name, which is so cool. I'm so impressed with David Leitch and Chad Stahelski has done, starting out as stuntmen and what they've been able to do to grow that business and make themselves not only very successful directors, but major Hollywood players. It's really cool. Now, as for the rest of the box office, still no movie has been able to hit the 60 million domestic mark, the 60 million mark domestically during this pandemic. And that's if they're lucky. That's really bad. I mean, look at the Courier's second weekend drop. That's shocking. And neither Raya nor Tom and Jerry have been able to duplicate The Croods 2's success, although both Raya and Tom and Jerry open day and date on their studios' respective streaming services, where the studios get 100% of that revenue. And even though Tom and Jerry didn't have an upsell, they have a higher subscription fee. So all that money goes to HBO, Warner Media. Still, Croods went to digital just 17 days later, three weeks later, and it did extremely well there too. I think Universal has a fabulous pandemic play. I wish we were finding out the numbers that they were making, because we don't even find out the numbers that Disney's making either, or HBO Max, but at least we get subscriber updates. There's just, Universal's financials are in the wind where they like it. All right, so anyway, bottom line, while the domestic box office is doing well enough to keep movie theaters in business, and that's good, studios need movie theaters to stick around for when this is all over, it's still nowhere near enough to stop studios from doing simultaneous digital plays, which is exactly what's happening. Now, what's the theatrical landscape going to look like after the pandemic? It's way too early to tell. It's just too early to tell. Now, speaking of streaming, let's take a look at how that's doing. Now, hooray! With its second to last episode, WandaVision finally moved up into the #2 position. Maybe next week, with its final episode, we'll be celebrating a #1 spot. I'm so happy for that show. But once again, the rest of the top 10 is all Netflix. But things get a little more interesting over with movies. I Care a Lot on Netflix jumps to #1. I believe this is its second week of release. But Hulu lands 2 movies in the top 10. Yay, Hulu! Also owned by Disney. I think, who is it? Universal still has a 30% stake. But anyway, The United States versus Billie Holiday and Nomadland are both in the top 10 this is a week from a couple of weeks ago. But that's fantastic. I continue to be frustrated that HBO Max is not in the mix here because their movies like The Little Things and Judas and the Black Messiah, I would love to see how these movies are competing. But we can't. What are you hiding, HBO Max? It's so weird. As for Netflix this week, acquired movie of the week, Bad Trip, shot to #1. And I saw it trend a couple of times too, while new series The Irregulars is right behind it. And say what you will about Yes Day, I did not care for it. I didn't think it was horrible. But you know what? Kudos to Jennifer Garner. She produced that movie, she stars, and it's in the top 10 still in its 3rd week. As for iTunes, Uni's Promising Young Woman and News of the World, again, here's this Uni strategy. They finally became available to rent for just $6. Remember, it starts out as a 48-hour rental for $20. Then you can purchase it for $20. And now you can rent it for just $6. And here comes another wave of renewed interest in these 2 titles, shooting them back to the top 2 spots on PVOD, which they deserve. They're both excellent films. If you haven't seen them yet, I suggest you circle back at the $6 price point. They are fantastic. Stick with News of the World. It pays off. Now, also, movies made outside the Hollywood machine that managed to grab some actor you've heard of, just a face you recognize, have been doing very well during the pandemic because Hollywood has been holding back a lot of its content for what they feel will be richer times. But that's created an opening, and more of these movies are able to find an audience. Now, what's coming out this week? Well, again, on Wednesday, Godzilla vs. Kong hits theaters and HBO Max in the United States, while Sony, and remember in the UK it's the day after, while Sony's The Unholy with Jeffrey Dean Morgan hits theaters exclusively on Friday. That's a horror film. They typically can do pretty well. we'll see what kind of numbers it brings in. Netflix's movie of the week is Concrete Cowboy, and Made for Love. HBO Max has some new content. Made for Love drops its first 3 episodes on HBO Max on Thursday, the day right after Godzilla vs. Kong. So it's a busy week for the streaming service. That show has an incredible cast, but so far, pretty mediocre reviews. No one's saying it's bad, but no one's saying it's good either. So that's this week's Movie Math. What are your thoughts on Godzilla vs. Kong and Nobody? And what have you been watching and what do you plan to watch? Share those thoughts down below, subscribe today, and of course, as always, you can check out some more videos right now.